Good afternoon, good morning actually. My name is Susan Reardon. I'm the staff hearing officer, and I'm going to call the meeting of Wednesday, October 22nd to order. Today we have 3 items on the agenda, and I'm going to take them in order. But before that, is there any requests for continuance, withdrawals, or postponements?
There are not.
Seeing that. Is there any announcements or appeals? I haven't received any.
I haven't.
Thank you. Is there anybody in the audience who'd wish to address the show on items not on the agenda? Seeing no one, we'll go to the first item. Is the applicant for 1617 Ormus Road here? No? Okay, I'll move on to item B and come back to item A. Is the applicant for 826 Jimeno Road? Yes. Okay, do you want to take a seat?
You can shine your mic. Thank you very much. The project site is approximately 9,000 square feet, zoned E1, located up on the Riviera, Jimeno Road. Current development on site consists of a single-family residence with attached garage. Development on site is currently going through a pretty major remodel, and some of that remodel will include some alterations to doors and windows located here on the front wall. The house is currently non-conforming as to its front yard setback, which in the E1 is typically 30 feet. Because of the overall slope of the first half of the lot exceeding 20%, the municipal code does allow a 5-foot reduction of that front yard setback down to 25, and that's shown like right through here. So the alterations in windows and doors along here need modification approval. So does a proposed entry porch being proposed here in the yellow. Other parts of the project include these new decks, which comply with all current development setbacks. The porch, however, is being proposed at a distance of just over 16 feet from the front lot line. It's staff's position that, considering newly approved zoning ordinance amendments that are now recognizing a 3-foot by 3-foot front porch, which is allowed just by the ordinance into a front yard setback, that we really want to review projects using that as kind of our basis. This porch, which is shown on the plans, or actually identified in the letter as being about 5 feet wide and 13 feet, the dimensions on the plan are slightly larger than that. Seems to exceed what we really intend to have as far as a front porch in a front yard setback, in that these areas, once they get a little bit larger, almost tend to encourage congregation. And the front yard, as we know, is an area that is intended to provide a buffer zone and to discourage those type of activities. So what staff was thinking, if we could do at least the 3-foot depth, meaning the encroachment into the front, we wouldn't mind leaving the entire deck, this 13-foot width, but to reduce its depth so that it actually, still from the street, gives that visual presence that the Design Review Board has commented on favorably, but would not intensify the nonconforming setback to the extent that the current proposal does. So we're asking that the staff hearing officer deny the application as submitted, but consider approving a 3-foot encroachment with the width as shown on the plan. We would want any consideration on your part to involve conditions that this paved area shown on the plan be removed. This would encourage parking in a front and side yard setback, which is prohibited by the code. And fortunately for these folks, the hedges being proposed in these areas are not going to be enforced upon due to the recent city council suspension on hedge enforcement. However, we do want them reviewed by the transportation planning staff to make sure that there's no visual obstructions created by the hedge heights in excess of 3.5 feet here. It's staff's understanding that this unimproved right-of-way actually allows for good visibility before you get into the traveled right-of-way, so the overheight may be approvable in this instance.
I actually have a past clarification on that. The City Council actually hasn't adopted an ordinance suspending enforcement, right? They're considering whether to make those amendments, correct?
That is correct.
So at this time, we are enforcing, but it may be a couple months down the road that's...
Right, and we've kind of applied it prematurely, but our practice to absolutely not allow anything in excess of 3.5 feet in anticipation of that suspension.
Okay, thank you. Okay, would you like to state your name and association with the project?
Yes, my name is Akiko Wade Davis. This is Jim Davis. We're both the designers for the project. And we would just like to emphasize the positive comments from the Single Family Design Review Board in relation to the size and the design of the porch. I'd like to clarify the dimensions, the difference in the dimensions shown on the plan and the scaled dimension. The scaled dimension of the 13 by 5 feet is actually given the design of the porch, there are columns and railings. So the 13 by 5 is the actual accessible dimensions of the porch. So that would be the area where you'd be considering, the area that people would be congregating if they were to do so. In addition, the Design Review Board's comments were addressing the size of the porch, including the depth of the porch, and one of the discussions at the board, and I think what they recognized was the dimensions of the porch are in response to the existing architecture, part of which is the existing overhang on this portion of the building is already at 3 feet. So in order to detail and work with that overhang, that's part of the reason why we're going for the extra depth.
And the elevations?
So you can see on this side dimension the existing overhangs.
Okay.
And also, the Design Review Board was also, in response to that, they were supportive of the depth of the porch and also stated that part of why they were supportive of it was because it was encroaching less than the existing garage into the front yard setback.
Okay.
The proposed porch.
Anything else to add?
No.
Okay. I'm going to open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to address the staff hearing officer on H26 Jimeno Road? Seeing no one, I close the public hearing. I understand the design aspects of the house. What I'm required to do is make findings regarding whether the modification prevents an unreasonable hardship, which is usually some kind of physical constraint on the site, if there's slopes or trees or what have you. In this instance, it is fairly open in this area, so I don't know that that would be the appropriate finding. Another finding is that it secures an appropriate improvement on the lot. Providing an entryway to the house is an appropriate improvement on the lot. As Ms. Malazzo said, the recent zoning ordinance amendments that were passed by the council, I was actually involved in those, and we had discussions on allowing outright, without the requirements of modification, a 3 by 3 area. And the ordinance committee and the city council was pretty clear that they didn't want large structures in the setback, and that's why they limited it to the 3 foot by 3 foot, and it's the accessible space like you were indicating, the 13 by 5. So it would be inside any required railings or posts. So this goes quite further beyond that. And the other finding is to promote a uniformity of improvement. And when I went out to the site yesterday, I looked at other homes in the area, and you submitted some photos, and there is varying setbacks in your neighborhood. But I don't know that I could say that this porch would promote, consistency in the neighborhood. So the one finding that I'm left with is that it's necessary to secure an appropriate improvement on the lot. And I, like staff, am struggling with finding that. Just the amount of the encroachment, the width, the length, And again, and I recognize the Single Family Design Board's comments regarding the design of the project. And Roxanne, or Ms. Muzzy, you were indicating you didn't have a concern with the length. It was more of the width of the project.
Correct.
The other modification regarding the changes of windows and doors, that's completely supportable.
Okay.
And what you're telling me is that a reduced width entry porch would not be something that would be okay with you guys, or?
We would prefer to have the extra depth as shown, just in keeping with traditional proportions of porches and also working with the existing overhang of the structure. And given the siding of the house, which I'm sure you saw when you visited, since it does slope down, our feeling is that the projection into the front yard setback is not as much of an impact since it is lower than the street. It's not going to, if you look at the photo, for example, of the house across the street, how it is a little bit more imposing because it is upslope from the street. Our feeling is that since this house is lower than the street level, it will have less of an impact in terms of encroaching into the front yard.
Now, in terms of the width, is there a way it could be cut back some? Cut back for just in the entryway, or why does it need to be?
There's a window right there that we're capturing for the stairwell. And then also the 3-foot by 3-foot can't work here because we also have side lights on this door. And when you get the post up against it, you're already making it wider than what your 3-foot by 3-foot would be.
Well, I was thinking more in this area.
Right.
But that would throw it off with the...
And part of the issue, too, is the distance between the side light and the window. The current design, we're showing a column against the wall of the house. And the width here, it would just... It's difficult to make it work and without having to decrease the size of the window as well as eliminate the side lights on the front door, which we would prefer not to have to do.
Yeah, I'm just getting back to the, it's a required 25-foot setback. You're encroaching about a third into that. It'd be a total of a third with the 16-foot setback. Do you have any more to add, Melissa?
I don't.
Well, this amount of encroachment, I just feel I can't make the findings and approve the modification. I think if it was reduced in size, that would be, that could be supportable. But given the recent discussion with the City Council on porch encroachments, I think this exceeds the scope of that. So I could deny the project, or if you want to continue to look at it, to redesign it to see if you can reduce the size and then come back.
Is your concern more with with the width of it or the depth, or?
I have more concern with the width.
Okay.
And you're talking with here?
I'm talking with
Oh,
here.
I
At the depth.
I see.
So
Oh, sorry.
if they
Yes,
were
no,
to reduce it, as staff suggested, to a 3-foot, because it visually would look the same from the street.
Right.
Yeah.
Just not from the side.
Right. We would like to keep it as designed. We understand your concerns. Is there, if we were to reduce the depth of this to make, instead of the 5-foot accessible area, to make it closer to, or the 3-foot accessible area, is that something that you could be able to approve and allow us to continue to move forward.
And Ms. Reardon, you would be okay with a 3-foot accessible plus a 2-foot eave and the post, which would probably be an additional 3 feet, so about 8.
Yes, that would be okay.
Okay.
And I could approve that today.
Okay.
And Ms. Milazzo, through the plan check process, would hear for that.
Okay.
It's a
Okay.
good, interesting closing, the condition that a zoning compliance declaration be recorded against the property's title due to the floor plan configuration of the lower level having full bathing facilities and exterior access.
Okay.
Okay.
So with that, I will approve the project as altered in our discussion. So that would include the windows and door changes and the setbacks, and then with the reduced encroachment into the front yard, making the findings in the staff report and with the condition Ms. Milazzo just specified.
Okay.
And this just, I need to note for the public record that we did receive a letter in opposition to the project from Ms. Paula Westbury, and she routinely monitors our projects and submits the letters. So this decision is appealable within 10 calendar days to the Planning Commission. They also have review authority of all my actions, and within that 7-day period, they can decide to suspend the action and call it for public hearing before the Planning Commission. And if that were to occur, Ms. Milazzo would contact you.
Okay.
Okay?
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Okay, is the applicant for 1617 Ormus here? Want to come up?
Thanks.
We went to the next item, so we'll start with that. Whenever you're ready.
This project site is just over 5,000 square feet, which is non-conforming to this E1 zone. Current development on site exists. Existing is a single-family residence with a detached garage. Both the garage and the residence have lower-level legal spaces below them at this time. The proposed project involves the elimination of the lower level of the residence, elimination of a portion of the habitable space below the garage, and 2 additions. This one that'll connect the lower level of the garage to the habitable space of the residence, and an expansion which forms a uniform improvement of an existing bedroom over here. It's staff's position that these 2 encroachments, which are located within the 10-foot interior yard setbacks, are necessary to secure an appropriate improvement of uniformity on both sides of the property. From the street, the house does sit quite a bit, maybe, 10 feet lower than the grade of the right-of-way above. The house will not appear to be any different. The encroachment will not appear to be intensified. We will point out that this property also, because of its slope, was allowed a 5-foot reduction of the 30-foot front yard setback. So the required setback for all new construction is 25 feet. The additions have been proposed to observe that. Staff is asking for approval of this application with the conditions that are contained in the staff report, involving a tree here that needs to be protected and preserved during construction, a zoning compliance declaration recorded that'll simply say this house cannot add any new square footage. Now that includes the areas that are being eliminated, and we do need the plans to show how they're going to be eliminated. They cannot be used for storage, etc. The elevations currently show an exterior door under here. We will want that removed. If the areas could be filled with dirt to render them unusable, I mean, that would be very desirable for staff. I'm talking about the elevations on the plans.
Right, I was just looking at
I
the
think those plans have been revised too. to reflect that.
Right, okay, great. And the whole reason behind that is floor area ratios, and the project would be over 100% of its floor area ratio if it's anything more than this plan shows, and therefore would require a floor area modification by the Planning Commission.
Okay, so then so that would also include in this area where there's access to this crawl space, you'd want that access removed? Okay, wait. And then I had a question regarding the open yard area that's verified that
Sure. I've scaled it. I came out at 1250 exactly. The applicant is slightly different. You are slightly different. I think if we document on the plan the open yard needs to be maintained at 1,250 square feet minimum, we're covered.
Okay.
But these like little dimension changes, you know, it's not a flat 50-foot wide lot with the 20, like another 25% of a square foot. It came up to 1,250 on my initial calculations and on the plans that were submitted for this review.
I think that was all my questions right now. Do you want to state your name and association with the project?
Curtis Mignot, Mignot Design Incorporated. We are the project designer and agent for the applicant. So we'll walk you through the project.
Sure.
Okay. At the onset of the project, the owners purchased this property. It's a dated 1940s house. There's existing habitable space below the main house, existing habitable space below the garage that isn't really functional and usable. It's the owner's intent to consolidate the habitable area onto one level of the property. I prepared a conceptual drawing and met with supervising planner Danny Cato on 7:30 to go over the conceptual design to see if it was in a configuration that staff could support, and he issued a letter saying that he could support the modifications. We're also eliminating an existing deck that is in the rear yard area and actually bringing the deck back to make it a little bit shallower than it is right now. We went before the Single Family Design Review Board, received favorable comments, went back to staff for the modification. We're asking that you make the findings of uniformity of the improvements as well as the use of the property. We're going to end up with a net reduction in square footage on the property by doing this project. And I just want to emphasize for any of the public that may be here that the deck addition on the rear is not part of the modification process. We're only asking for the modification for the front additions. The deck is compatible, or within the setbacks. The project's compatible to the neighborhood. We're also within the side yard setbacks. There are no windows proposed so that there won't be a privacy issue to the neighboring properties. There's an existing window in the existing bathroom down here that there's a bit of a discrepancy on whether or not it was permitted or not permitted, and in order to just put the issue away, we've decided to eliminate that window in the side yard, just be done with it. In reference to the access to the lower areas, the building code requires that we provide access to crawl spaces for inspection, that kind of access to the structural members. I've reduced the crawl space to 22 by 30, which is the minimum allowed by the building code in order to access crawl space areas. And we will be abandoning the existing improvements and bringing that into just a dirt crawl area in the area underneath the existing house. In regards to the project areas, and this references the square footages as well as the open space area, the areas were derived using the computer program AutoCAD, and we just listed them, so we can bring them out to the 10,000ths of a square foot if you'd like, but we've confirmed them many times to make sure that we're compliant. And I think that would be the end of my presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
This time I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone who wishes to address the staff hearing officer on 1617 Oramus Road? No? Okay, I would like to note that I received a letter from Ms. Paula Westbury on this project also, expressing concerns regarding the request. And with that, I close the public hearing. Well, I read the staff report and went out and visited the site and actually walked kind of around in this area. There was no one home at the time, so I
Okay.
made myself around. And I agree with staff on the recommendations. This is a small lot. It's significantly below the required minimum lot size. I like the fact that there's no additional openings within the setbacks. That respects your neighbors. I also like the fact that you are outside of the front setback. And I think on your subsequent plans, you should move the line to say 25-foot setback, because that is your setback given the slope of it.
Okay.
So that's more clear. Because if someone was to come in and look at the plans, their first question is, well, they propose an addition within the setback. So
Got it. So as far as labeling that, should I say 25-foot setback due to slope, or pursuant to that? Okay. Okay.
And again, the additions, this one's behind the garage. You can't see it from the street, and due to the slope, you can't see the bedroom addition for proposed bedroom 3. So with that, I make the findings in the staff report and approve your modification, subject to the condition regarding the tree and the tree protection and the zoning compliance declaration. And you have a project. And this application, or this decision, is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days. And again, they have the oversight authority of all my actions. And within that same 10-day appeal period, they can decide to call it up for a hearing at their board.
Okay.
If that were to happen, Ms. Malazzo would contact you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks. This will be the set. I'd like you to stamp, because that's correct.
Thank you.
Thank you. And the next item, 1425 Mission Ridge Road.
Good morning. It's been a long time. Have you been hiding in your cubicle or something? I believe you asked for this photo as well.
Great, thank you.
Does that help?
Yeah.
Okay. It's not exactly where you asked for her, but it's very, very close. I think it shows Franceschi, which is probably what you were after.
And just the view.
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Good morning.
Good morning.
This site is located at 1425 Mission Ridge Road, and it's in the Hillside Design District in the Riviera neighborhood. The property is currently developed with a single-family residence, 1-story, and a 2-car garage. It's surrounded by Franceschi Park and residential development. This proposal is a request to amend a prior approval from the Planning Commission for an as-built 55-foot long retaining wall, 836 cubic yards of grading in the front yard and within the public right-of-way, an as-built pool removal, and a new entry gate and wall, and a landscape plan. The Planning Commission approved this project in 2006 with conditions. The applicant is requesting a staff hearing officer amendment to change that approval to reduce the finished grade adjacent to the retaining wall by 1.5 feet instead of the 5 feet approved by the Planning Commission, and to allow a higher retaining wall height ranging from 3.73 feet to 6.11 feet and 11 inches instead of the 3.5 feet to 6.42 feet approved by the Planning Commission. The discretionary approval required is a modification to allow a wall height that exceeds 3.5 feet in height within 10 feet of the front lot line and within 10 feet of the driveway. And so the wall in question is located here. A little background on this project. Like I said, it was approved by the Planning Commission in 2006, subject to conditions. It came partially before the Planning Commission due to an as-built situation of enforcement case for removal of landscaping in the public right-of-way, and at the grading, its cumulative grading over 500 cubic yards within 2 years. So once the grading was done and the landscaping was removed, a view corridor was created from Franceschi Park. And the Planning Commission recognized that new view corridor and conditioned the project with a recording condition for the view corridor to remain, and that condition is included in this report. A similar condition also, because the project was brought forth to the Planning Commission for cumulative grading from the back wall, they conditioned that there would be cascading vines in the back, which I believe the applicant has already implemented. So some of those conditions have been carried forth. The original project was reviewed by the Architectural Board of Review. Also, in February of 2008, the applicant came back with a substantial conformance request it was an alternate solution, and they requested that they revise the grade on the street side by 1 foot instead of the 5 foot required by the Planning Commission. They were proposing a new wall behind here to reduce have a tiered effect and reduce the apparent height of the wall, and then not reduce the height by 2 feet as the Planning Commission had required. And this curved portion of the wall, that driveway, has been referred throughout this project as the cheek wall. And they were going to revise the grade, and so it would have a height of 3.5 feet with the grade revised. The Planning Commission looked at that, and they didn't feel that that was in keeping with the original approval, and they denied that. The substantial conformance request was denied. Originally, the applicant had submitted at the first project 2 options. Option A, heard before the Planning Commission, was to leave the as-built wall as is, in a height ranging from 3.73 feet to approximately 8.11 inches, I believe, 8.42 inches. And the Planning Commission did not want to go with option A, so they chose option B with the changes to the grade. Since that time, other issues have come up regarding the fruited roots for the trees, and the applicant is before us once again to request an alternate amendment. The situation at that point, the neighborhood preservation ordinance that had required the applicant to go before the Planning Commission for cumulative grading, that ordinance was revised, and that grading trigger no longer exists. Therefore, the project is only requiring a modification to be heard before the staff hearing officer at this point. Some issues that came up that, according to the applicant, they're proposing what they believe is a compromise to the original Planning Commission approval, and one reason is they have submitted a arborist report stating that, in part, and that's been included with our application, that the oak trees have developed a new root system, and that removing the soil in the oak root zone would be a serious assault on the health of the trees. And so they have made this proposal that kind of deals with that, and also deals with the Planning Commission's concern. The Parks Division also had a recommendation to not lower the grade, to lower the height of the wall. But they said if we did, that they would recommend conditions, and those conditions have been included as part of this project. This project went to the Single Family Design Board in July, and they are in support of the modification. They request the landscaping to be low mounting and preserving the pedestrian views from Mission Ridge. Staff recommends that we approve the project as requested in the amendment, and make the findings that is consistent with the zoning ordinance necessary to secure an appropriate improvement to the property. Also, staff has received correspondence, it's forwarding to you, and a copy of the original project in 2005 had received some support from the neighborhood, and this was submitted for the 2005, a copy of that petition. And that concludes the presentation by staff.
Okay, thanks. One clarification. So the project the Planning Commission was looking at earlier this year in substantial conformance was to reduce the grade by 1 foot here, leave the wall as is, put a 2-foot boulder in this
That
area,
is correct.
and then raise the driveway.
Correct.
Okay. And now it's before us today.
That substantial conformity request was denied.
Correct.
And
wait,
then,
just a minute.
sure, sorry.
So then what's before me today is to reduce the grade 2 feet, then the wall 1.5 feet,
Right.
and then no changes to the driveway.
That is correct.
Okay. Okay. If you wanted to state your name and
Sure.
association with the project.
Philip Sooting, landscape architect. Mr. Escalera, owner. The wall is unusual in that it doesn't violate the intent of the ordinance. The intent of the ordinance, as I perceive it, and I think you would too, is to protect the city from large walls that face public streets. This is unique and unusual because it is on the downhill side, and the portion of wall that affects the face of the wall that affects anybody is on the downhill side, and the downhill side does not see. The owner is the only one that can see the face of the wall, so that's exceeds the height of the ordinance. The grade is being proposed to be reduced, particularly to preserve the oak trees. We are going to stay 8 feet away from the trunk of the tree and then reduce the grade from that point forward, or that point into the property. Then the height of the wall will also be reduced by 1.5 feet. After the substantial conformity denial at the Planning Commission, the owner intended on implementing the proposed plan of reducing it by 3 feet and so on. As he started the project, he had city staff come up for the conditions of the project, and city staff raised some concerns about the tree, about the road, about drainage, a bunch of things. So we went back and got an independent arborist report on the tree. They did an in situ investigation. They found feeder roots up in the top 18 inches of soil. And if that soil is to be removed per the conditions of the Planning Commission, it would seriously impede the trees. And we don't want that, as I'm sure the city doesn't either. So that's where we are today. We've come up with a compromise of reducing the grade 8 feet from the tree trunks down 1.5 feet, and then reducing the wall 1.5 feet as well. We did take this to the Single Family Design Board, and the Planning Commission liaison, Ms. Larson, was there. They did support the modification with the landscape conditions, as you see in the staff report. And we do have Tim Downey here, city arborist, as well as Paul Zink, the chair of the SFDB.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Zink, would you like Mr. Zink? Anything to add? We need to get a chair.
Thank you. My name's Paul Zink, and I'm the vice chair of the Single Family Design Board. I have nothing really to add. I was listening. The board did review it, and they kind of questioned why the work was being done to begin with, but we understood that with the report from the arborist saying that the roots were there, that we understand why the wall isn't being lowered anymore. So for that reason, we were in support of what he was proposing. Thanks.
Then the comment regarding landscaping.
Below mounding?
Yeah.
We had 2 landscape people, architects on our landscape designers on our board, and they were looking at the types of plantings that were there, and either we read somewhere or there was a comment made that the plant shouldn't grow too tall and too high to block people's view, and they started reading what the plants were that were on that palette, and they said, you know what, this one, this one, and this one have a mature height that's going to be too high. You need to remove these landscaping and put something else in their place. So we did scrutinize. I say those two people scrutinized it. I didn't quite understand all of it. I mean, the concept I do, but the names and that kind of stuff I didn't follow.
Okay.
So it was one of our conditions was to have low mounting plants because we don't want to have something tall grow up and block the pedestrian view for walkers.
Okay.
And staff would just like to say that one of the concerns was the hedge height to be, because it's at 3.5 feet, and we know hedges have a tendency to grow quickly. So due to the beauty corridor condition from the Planning Commission, we were thinking that, another type of shrub that would be better suited to that area and less likely to grow would be in keeping with the single-family design board.
Our minutes might reflect what we recommended. I don't know. And this still has to come back to the single-family design board, and those issues will be scrutinized further.
Okay. Well,
And that plant material has been revised as you see it on this plan. So
been revised from that?
in response to the SFDB's comments.
Because, the height of the hedge, since it's within 5 feet of the retaining wall, is included in the total height of the wall. So if the wall is proposed almost 7 feet, then you have to add the 3.5 foot of that hedge also.
Didn't know that.
Yeah, if it's within 5 feet.
Okay. And we're proposing to use a native material that stays fairly low, and a note on there to maintain a 3.6 above grade.
Okay.
I would say, to follow up on your comment, our concern was from the pedestrian and the public right-of-way looking this direction, and so the height wasn't too great because there is a city view as you stroll there. We did not take into consideration the view from this end looking up and having 7 feet plus 3.5. That we didn't discuss that, and I don't think that's one of our concerns.
Yeah, that's just a technicality of the zoning ordinance, and actually future phases of zoning ordinance amendments, we are going to be looking at fence, screen, and hedge height requirements, particularly in hedges right away. But because, like you've alluded to, the main issue on the fences is from the public right-of-way. So what we want, the limit, what we were thinking is 3.5 feet from the edge of the public right-of-way, looking up. So, this way, it's a design issue, which is the SFDB or the ABR would take care of. But in terms of zoning, what we want to look for from the public right-of-way. So that is a future idea staff has, but it hasn't been scheduled.
And let me also point out, too, that, if this is a 3.5 foot tall hedge, it's also 1.5, almost 2 feet below the grade of the road. So there's that.
Right, different.
Yeah, difference, and you would see over it.
Okay. All right, great, thanks. I see some other staff members in the audience. Did you want to come up and state your name for the record?
Good morning, Tim Downey, Urban Forest Superintendent, also known as City Arborist. Although we don't condone the original grade change on this project due to the effect on the oaks, any grade change can be detrimental to their health. The result of this grade change has actually improved their health, most likely due to better water penetration for the roots. But any additional grade changes will have a detrimental effect on the city oak trees, and although their compromise is better than what Planning Commission recommended, I still would prefer to see no grade change, but the compromise is better than the original plan.
Now, given they are city street trees, if the request were to be approved, would you want some sort of condition placed on the project that the health of the trees be monitored over a certain period of time, and if they were to die as a result of the activities, to be replaced, or?
We've already spoke to conditions that we'd like to see, and they are on the conditions already. At this time, I don't see a need to add to those.
Okay, so if a tree were to be removed or were to die due to the activities in the area, you would not be recommending that a condition be placed on here that the applicant would replace the tree?
If I may speak, that would probably be handled as a separate sort of occurrence, or it's just like if a tree died in your front yard as from the effect of putting in an irrigation system or something, a street tree, then the city arborist would probably take up that case at that time. I don't know. I'm speaking for
He's correct. We have other means to go after that, and I don't see it as an issue strong enough to put it as a condition.
Okay. That's Mike. Thank you. All right. Was there anything else you wanted to add, or no?
That's all I want.
Great. Thank you.
And then finally, if Mr. Escalera wants to add anything.
Okay. Just.
No.
Okay. All right. Do you want to add it now, or?
No, ma'am.
Okay.
We've talked already.
I'd like to open the public hearing. Is there anyone who would like to address Staff Hearing Officer on 1425 Mission Ridge? Oops, you know what? I would like to note, as Joanna stated, we did receive 2 letters. One was from Ms. Paula Westbury again, expressing concerns, and the other one was the petition.
And I did just want to point out in that letter, she mentions a tree house, and there is no tree house proposed or existing. So.
Okay. With that, I'll close the public hearing. One of the questions I had, but it was answered, was given the grade difference, if building department would come back to say there's a guardrail required, but since it's not along the path of travel, that's not necessary. The other one was in regards to the landscape plan, and Mr. Zink answered that one. I agree. I think that your request is supportable to reduce the height of the wall. It's a good compromise along with the grading. However, I agree with the SFDB regarding the height of the hedge, and I would like the hedge to be replaced, and this would be a condition with landscaping that at maturity wouldn't exceed a height of 3.5 feet. Hedges along the front property line has just been a constant enforcement problem. And it's all, everyone has attention to keep it at 3.5 feet, but it migrates up and up and then it gets taller. So why create that situation in the first place? And I realize council is going to be taking up this discussion in the next couple of weeks regarding enforcement of the hedges. But at this time, I still believe that the landscape plan should reflect something that's consistent with our current requirements. And so then I would request that the landscaping just be of the type that is not going to grow higher than 3.5 feet. And like I said earlier, staff has been wanting to entertain an amendment to that section to truly reflect the concerns with fence heights from the public right-of-way for 3.5 feet, and the wall from the public right-of-way, is lower, significantly lower than the 3.5 feet, even with the change in grade. Therefore, I think, or I can make the findings that this revised project is consistent with the purposes and intent of the zoning ordinance, and approve the project, subject to the conditions as outlined in the staff report, and then with the additional landscaping condition.
Thank you.
And sure, this project or this action is appealable to the Planning Commission within 10 calendar days, and they also have oversight authority in which they can review the actions and decide whether they should call it up, suspend my approval, and have a public hearing before them.
Perfect.
Great, thanks.
Great. Thanks, Susie.
Sure. And with that, I adjourn the meeting.